A big win for the Memphis Grizzlies out in Los Angeles against the Clippers, a comeback victory. No, the Grizzlies do not make the NBA Cup. No Las Vegas trip for me, but better basketball for Memphis means an opportunity to build upon success. That matters a heck of a lot more, even for this, or especially for this NBA Cup hater. I'm Joe Mullinax. This is Locked On Grizzlies. It's a bonus episode. Let's lock in.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to this special bonus edition of Locked On Grizzlies. It is I, Joe Mullinax, very excited to be here with you. Senior contributor over at Beale Street Bears, co-host of this here podcast. No DeMichael Cole. He is enjoying a bit of a breather. DeMichael has been busy. He had our Thanksgiving-ish episode of the show, and he'll also have our Monday edition of the podcast. If you're an everydayer at this point, you know I will be sleeping on Sunday night while the Grizzlies play the Kings. But I'm happy to be here with you this last episode for November for us here at Locked On Grizzlies. A very successful November, very grateful for that, and very thankful on this Thanksgiving weekend to be here with you. Each and every time an episode drops, hopefully you're an everydayer at this point and you're hanging out with us. Make sure that you're liking, commenting, rating, reviewing, subscribing on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Google, YouTube. Thank you so much for being a part of making us the #1 sports podcast network here at the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are continuing to build our tiny little corner of the internet we like to call Locked On Grizzlies, and we are very proud that you have made the choice to listen, watch, however you take in the show. It is not lost on DeMichael and I. You have lots of content opportunity, but you've chosen us, and we are thankful for that. I'm thankful for the Grizzlies winning 4 of their last 5 games because that is a lot more fun to talk about, right? We can put the trade machine away for a while. We don't have to waive Vince Williams Jr. for Charles Bassey. Whoever said that was an idiot, right? We don't have to do that anymore because the Grizzlies are playing better basketball. Now, context is key. We'll talk more about that later on in the show, but there's no denying that the Grizzlies are playing better, and there's no denying that the Grizzlies came back from down double digits. Once again, they were down by 13 at the half to the Los Angeles Clippers, and yet a really strong second half performance pushes the Grizzlies past Los Angeles. The Grizzlies win. And context, in the interest of fairness, matters when it comes to the Grizzlies-Clippers game because the Clippers arguably were the much more talented team. I don't even know there's much of an argument there. Kawhi Leonard plays in the game, plays 30 minutes. James Harden plays 40 minutes. Ivica Zubac plays almost 40 minutes. And Zubac is where I'm going to start this particular edition of the show because this is a guy who is one of the better bigs in the NBA, certainly one of the more underrated bigs in the NBA. And you can tell that when Zach Edey rolls up on him, he is excited because Zubac is not used to being one of the smaller guys on the court, at least compared to the other bigs. But that is exactly what occurs when Zach Edey shows up, whether they play in Los Angeles or they play in Memphis like they're about to in the next several days. Zubac wants to compete with Zach Edey, and Zach Edey got the best of him. Zach Edey absolutely got the best of him. 19 rebounds for Zach Edey. 19 rebounds against the Los Angeles Clippers. And it wasn't just the fact that Edey was dominant on the glass and helped lead Memphis in that particular space. The Grizzlies won the rebounding battle 53-39 against the Clippers. It was the kinds of rebounds. It was the variety, a smorgasbord, if you will, on this Thanksgiving weekend of rebounding. Whether it was being dominant, not just on the defensive glass, but on the offensive glass. 13 defensive rebounds, 6 offensive rebounds. That's extra possessions. That's extra opportunities to score. And it's not just Edey getting the rebound and scoring it himself, because Zach Edey only took 4 shots in this game. He only attempted 4 shots. That was the fewest of any Grizzly that played in the contest, aside from John Konchar. And if you are an everydayer, you know exactly of how I feel about John Konchar. So John Konchar not taking a shot in 11 minutes of play, that doesn't surprise me. But the fact that Edey was second to last in that particular statistic, a bit surprising. Edey probably needs more shots, but he was still impactful in terms of helping the Memphis Grizzlies win this game because of tap-out rebounds, getting extra shooting opportunities for players like Cam Spencer. Cam Spencer, a team second best, plus 19 in single game plus minus. He and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, who we'll talk more about here in a moment, really successful in terms of how they competed in this particular contest. Cam Spencer continues to provide meaningful minutes when he's given this opportunity with these injuries that the Grizzlies have sustained. But Zach Edey dominated Zubac on the glass in particular, and that was the most important place to be dominant. It's not like Zubac was that impactful scoring the ball either. He was better passing, 5 assists. But Zach Edey won a matchup against one of the better bigs, not just in the Western Conference, but the entire NBA. That is something that should have you excited. Zach Edey looked good. You know who else looked good? Jaren Jackson Jr., the closer, the offensive weapon. That is the guy that the Grizzlies have needed. 24 points on 13 shots, 3 for 5 from beyond the arc, and that's an important stat. That means that Jaren was extremely effective, 6 for 8 on his 2-point shots, and Jaren also attempted 4 free throws. You would like that to be a little bit higher. Jalen Wells, for example, going 8 for 8 from the charity stripe. For a perimeter-based wing player, you'd like to see your perimeter-based big dribble and get to the rim and draw a little more contact. But you can't control the officiating. You can't control the whistle that Jaren gets, which we've talked about here on Lockdown Grizzlies a lot. Not the best whistle, comparatively speaking, across the NBA, but the aggression of Jaren, the way that he was engaged. That is what you want to see as he continues to get more comfortable in the schemes of Tumas Isolo. Because clearly, the team is getting more comfortable in those schemes. This is why we always say, call me at Christmas, right? I always preface these conversations. I think Vince Williams Jr. is the one exception, and I'll take that L. Call me at Christmas. We have to see how these things look. And as we get close to the calendar turning to December, the Grizzlies are playing better. Now, who they're playing matters on that front, but the Grizzlies are winning these games, and they are putting themselves in a position to be in the play-in competition while they are without Ja Morant, while they are without Ty Jerome, who has not played a minute of regular season basketball so far for the Memphis Grizzlies. When your other offensive weapons and catalysts are not playing, you need the guy that you pay almost like a max player to participate and compete at that level. And that's exactly what Jaren did. Now, somebody in the comments or on X is going to let me know that Jaren only had 2 rebounds in the game. And I am well aware that the almost 7-foot Jaren Jackson Jr. only had 2 rebounds in the game. I am going to once again tell you that I do not care. Do I wish that number was higher? Yeah, of course I do. Jaren Jackson Jr. is not that kind of player. Never has been, never will be. And you know what? If you're an advocate for Zach Edey, this is a perfect place where you can say, between Edey and Jaren, the starting front court, they averaged 10.5 rebounds. Edey is that glass eater. Edey is that dominant force rebounding. Edey is the guy that is going to make Jaren that much more impactful. Now, I talked about this earlier this week, and I talked about it on social media, the extremely flawed nature of the stars of the Memphis Grizzlies. Jaren Jackson Jr., we talked about his rebounding, a little bit predictable in his offense, still only 2 assists, wish he'd keep his eyes up on his drives, but an offensively impactful game, and Jaren is still a very good defender. Ja Morant, not getting to the rim the way that he once did, one of the worst 3-point shooters in the NBA so far this season. Again, small sample size. Hopefully that number progresses to the mean, and Ja is closer to, around 30, 31%. Eventually, that means he's got to make some threes eventually. The flawed nature of the Grizzlies, stars in particular. Does it make sense to have max contract players when you are looking at a situation where they are not able to be as impactful unless they have a role player like Zach Edey on the floor with them? And first off, I think it's fair to say Zach Edey is more than a role player. I'm not going to go as far as to say he's the most impactful Grizzly ever, as I saw a couple folks say on social media. Let's have some nuance in our Zach Edey conversation. But I do think Edey, in terms of the role that he plays, he will eventually, because they haven't played together at all this season, that's important to understand, eventually will create room for Ja Morant and make Ja's life easier, much like Steven Adams and Jonas Valanciunas before him did. And he clearly is able to negate the weakness of Jaren as a rebounder. And we can talk more as the days and weeks march along about whether or not paying Ja and Jaren the amount that they're paid when they're so dependent on Zach Edey, who eventually is going to have to get paid, right? Still a couple years away from that, but something to keep in mind. Does it make sense to have those guys in that spot? It's a conversation for another day. But as of now, Zach Edey is on a rookie contract, and Zach Edey allows for Jaren and Ja to be the best versions of themselves. Is that ideal? No. But Ja and Jaren are not ideal superstars or stars for the Memphis Grizzlies. Trying to build a roster around those flaws makes sense. And I think Edey next to Jaren is perhaps the best example of that currently on the Grizzlies roster. So kudos to the Grizzlies, comeback victory in Los Angeles. No NBA Cup, no trip to Vegas for me. But those of you that are everydayers know I hate the NBA Cup, so that doesn't really break my heart. The win is far more important than any phony fake tournament. When we come back here on Lockdown, with terrible courts, by the way, just awful, god-awful, eyesore courts. When we come back here on this special episode of Locked On Grizzlies, making the most of the opportunity ahead of Memphis heading into Sacramento. Stick around here on Locked On Grizzlies. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by DoorDash. The NBA season is heating up, and DoorDash has found the perfect way to keep fans in their bag all season long. Whether you are watching for the highlights, your fantasy team, or just your favorite player, DoorDash makes every game night even better. DoorDash is the official on-demand platform of the NBA, and they are celebrating with something called the Bag Drop. Every time an NBA player scores 50 points in a game, DoorDash drops 50% off your order with Dash Pass the next day, and you're automatically entered for a chance to win the ultimate fan bag. We're talking player-inspired drip, exclusive gear, and stuff that you'll actually want. It's not just food. You can get everything sent to you, from snacks to drinks, headphones, ice, even socks. All of it can be delivered, and DoorDash has you covered for late night highlights, last minute watch parties, and double overtime fuel ups. The next time somebody goes off for 50, use the promo code NBA50 the next day to get 50% off on DoorDash with Dash Pass, plus your shot at the bag drop. Dash Pass members only, 50% off up to $10 the day after a 50-point game with promo code. Terms apply. No purchase necessary. Ends April 13th. Open to United States residents 21 or older. Visit DoorDashInYourBag.com for full details. DoorDash, in your bag all season long. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies also brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the National Basketball Association. Even if you miss the start of a game or you want to ride the hot hand, you see that Santi Aldama, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Jaren Jackson Jr., they're hitting some shots that maybe they don't normally hit. FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team is making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. What are you waiting for? Go and head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the National Basketball Association. Closing out this bonus edition of Locked On Grizzlies, I am Joe Mullinax, your host for this episode. DeMichael Cole will be back with you for our Monday edition of the show, but I wanted to make sure I had a chance to hop in and be excited, right? I feel like I'm the negative Nancy sometimes, the Debbie Downer. The Grizzlies are playing well. I believe I mentioned earlier in the show, winning 4 of their last 5 games. 4 of their last 5 games, considering the fact that at the darkest moments of the season so far, the Memphis Grizzlies were losing 4 games in a row, 5 games in a row. They were 1-9 over a 10-game stretch from Halloween until November 18th. So for about 2.5 weeks there, it was pretty dark and dreary. But since that November 18th loss to the San Antonio Spurs, the Grizzlies, again, 4 of their last 5, they have won. Context matters. Who have they beaten over these last 5 games? Sacramento Kings. Not a good basketball team. The opponent for the Grizzlies coming up Sunday. Dallas Mavericks. Not a good basketball team, but still a win. They lost to the Denver Nuggets. Very good basketball team that just lost to the San Antonio Spurs without Victor Wembanyama. That seems significant. The New Orleans Pelicans. Bad basketball team, and the Grizzlies needed overtime to win that game. And then you have the Los Angeles Clippers. Again, not the best basketball team right now, but Kawhi Leonard played and was extremely effective. James Harden played almost 40 minutes. Zubac, as we talked about earlier, played almost 40 minutes. The Clippers were pretty much at full tilt. And I think that is the game to be the most excited about, building on this momentum, because the schedule is still pretty light for Memphis. The Kings, bad basketball team. It's at Sacramento, but that's a game the way the Grizzlies are currently playing, they should win. That would put them at 9-12, right? And obviously 9-12. That sounds a heck of a lot better than 8-13. From there, the Grizzlies have a game with the pretty impressive San Antonio Spurs. They may well be for real this season, and it might be a challenge for the Grizzlies to be able to overcome that. So again, if we're talking about being unbiased and fair, wins and losses, that sort of thing, the San Antonio game probably not going to be for the Grizzlies. The Grizzlies have an opportunity against Sacramento to continue to build the right way of playing, their right way of playing. A bad Kings team, not as bad as the Grizzlies at this moment, or excuse me, not as good as the Grizzlies at this moment. It's not like the Grizzlies are elite by any stretch of the imagination. But as of this recording, Memphis is at the number 10 spot in the play-in tournament. If the season ended today, which obviously 20 games in, about a quarter of the way through, the season does not end today. But the Grizzlies have a chance to continue to build, right? After that San Antonio game, that's going to be a test. After that, they've got the Clippers at home after a couple of days off. It's been reported that Ja Morant is going to be reevaluated next week once the Grizzlies return from this road trip. Could Ja be back in the mix by that Clippers game? Maybe. Probably not. Hopefully you get good injury news on the Morant front. And then you go from the Clippers to the Trailblazers that are also in the play-in mix with you currently. The Utah Jazz that are also in the play-in mix currently. The Grizzlies go back out to Los Angeles for a game against the Clippers on the 15th of December. You're picking up what I'm putting down. The Grizzlies have a chance, this continued stretch where they play multiple teams with losing records. Over the next 6 or 7 games, because Washington comes after Minnesota at Minnesota on the 17th, until they play the Thunder again on the 22nd of December, the Grizzlies play a bunch of teams with losing records. Sacramento, the Clippers, the Trailblazers, the Jazz, the Clippers again. And then you've got Washington at home, potentially the worst team in the NBA. So if the Grizzlies rattle off 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 wins there, and they only lose a couple, now you're looking at a team that is back to around 500, maybe 11-13. And if that is possible, as awesome as that would be, 11-13, 12-13, 12-14, again, you're around 500 without Ty Jerome. You're around 500 without Ja Morant. Making the most of that opportunity is extremely significant. But how do they do that? They continue to build around and through Zach Edey. Zach Edey is an impactful Grizzly. As DeMichael and I said on our most recent episode that we were together, we both agree the most significant Grizzly right now is Zach Edey. Maybe we jumped the gun a little bit on Cedric Howard. Got to remember he is a rookie, and he looks very different on the road than he does at home. His shooting numbers are down when he's at home, when he's on the road compared to when he's at home. Got to remember Ced is a rookie. Still playing well. Still should continue to start. Zach Edey is the most significant Grizzly. After that, it's Jaren Jackson Jr. right now until Ja Morant returns. The way that the Grizzlies won the game against the Clippers is you had Zach Edey being dominant on the glass. You had Jaren getting into his offensive rhythm. You had a strong bench performance, right? The starters for the Clippers pretty much outplayed the Grizzlies starters, but it was the bench for Memphis. Santi Aldama continuing his efficient offensive campaign. Jock Landale, much better role for Jock. 12 points, 6 rebounds. This is where he belongs as a reserve. That's what I said all along. People called me a Jock Landale hater. I just didn't want him to start. He's an end-of-rotation guy when this team is healthy. And 16 minutes, 12 points, 6 rebounds against the Clippers. Go dominate reserve bigs. I'm great with Landale in that space. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope having a bit of a renaissance after his move to the bench. He was the leader in single-game plus-minus for Memphis against the Clippers. The Grizzlies were 19 points better with KCP on the court than they were with him off of it. That doesn't mean KCP should be the starter and replace Cedric Howard again. It just means that this might be the best use of KCP in this current Grizzlies scheme, this current Grizzlies setup. Building upon that, letting him have that opportunity to take those heat check threes, building his confidence. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope has been a starter for a majority of his career, a vast majority of his career. In this reserve role, let him have opportunity to take some ownership on that bench, especially with Ty Jerome out for the foreseeable future. KCP, Santi Aldama, being the leaders of that reserve group, they look like they are getting comfortable. They look like they're starting to understand the spots and the spaces and where they're supposed to be in the Isolo scheme. And that matters. That comfort level matters because the Grizzlies have a chance here to win more than they lose over the next couple of weeks, just like they've done these last week and a half. Winners of 4 of their last 5 could easily become winners of 8 of their last 10. And if that does indeed become the case, we've been talking about hovering around 500 until the team is healthy, if the team is ever healthy. Hovering around 500, then go on a run once you have Ja and Jaren and Edey and everybody out there together. Will that ever be the case? Very fair question to ask now, given how the season has played out for the Grizzlies to this point. 8-12 is not where the Grizzlies wanted to be, but at the same time, they appear to be finding their rhythm. They appear to be finding themselves. Zach Edey has been absolutely that impactful for this team. And because of that impact, and because of the opportunity that Memphis has in front of them, the play-in looks realistic once again. Now, it's still competitive in the Western Conference. The Jazz, only a game back of the Grizzlies. The Clippers obviously do not want to be a play-in team. They plan on going on a run at some point in their own way, I would imagine. But the Grizzlies have a chance to continue to hover around this space. They need to make the most of it through the process of Zach Edey being dominant on the glass, working through him, getting Jaren opportunities in his spots to get into a rhythm early in games, allowing for him to be your closer, and continue to ride a bench that is finding comfort as well. The bench of the Grizzlies outplayed the Clippers bench. The depth of the Grizzlies was on display against Los Angeles. Continue to allow for that to be a focal point and continue to let these younger players compete and make mistakes and learn from those mistakes against these teams that Memphis is better than, so that when they do play the teams that the Grizzlies are not as good as, they are better prepared thanks to the reps that they're getting now in more advantageous situations. Thank you so much for being with me on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. It is much appreciated. Make sure that you're making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your next listen. Love that show. If you haven't checked it out with Josh Lloyd, he does a phenomenal job getting you ready each and every day for winning your league, winning a daily fantasy situation, all while making you a smarter NBA fan. Find Locked On Fantasy Basketball on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Part of the #1 sports podcast network, the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure you're liking, commenting, rating, reviewing, subscribing wherever you get podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Google, YouTube. Become an everydayer. Make us a part of your everyday NBA and Memphis Grizzlies content consumption each and every time an episode drops, a bonus episode here and there. Obviously, every day during the week, DeMichael Cole will be with you on our Monday edition of the show, talking about Grizzlies Kings, looking ahead to continuing to build on the positive vibes. Obviously, a very important game for the Grizzlies, beating the Clippers. Another important win, a chance for a winnable game, a game that should be won by Memphis. Hopefully that's what DeMichael is breaking down on our next edition of the show. Thank you so much for being with me on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. We will catch you next time. Remember, we're free and available wherever you get podcasts. Become an everydayer. We'll catch you then. See you next time. Bye.